What's up? Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit more serious. I'm going to be talking about my drug addiction, and I tried to do this once before, but I ended up just naming every drug that I ever did, and yeah, I didn't like the way that video turned out. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how my addiction affected my life, friendships, relationships, and all that. So let me start off by saying I am a recovering addict myself. I'm coming up on about 4 months sober, and yeah, just trying to find outlets to keep me sane and sober. So let's get into it. So I started getting high back in 2010. I was 16 years old, and it all started off by just smoking a little bit of weed, not too often, just every other day. My friend would come over and she would smoke me out. Okay, so eventually I had switched schools and I went to what they call a charter school, but I'm just gonna call it a school for potheads because my first class started at 12 in the afternoon and my last class ended at 4 in the afternoon. So 4 hours a day, no homework, no uniforms, nothing like that. And I'm pretty sure even all the teachers were a bunch of potheads too. So this school would be where I met my first dealer. And he was a pretty nice guy. I was always like a really quiet, shy kid back in middle school and high school. And he was kind of like one of the only people that would come up and hang out with me and talk to me and shit. So eventually I started just going over to his place after school and just smoke a bunch of weed all day. And it's kind of funny because before I started doing drugs, I always used to say shit like people who smoke weed and do drugs are going to ruin their life and they're going to get themselves killed. Welp. But yeah, no, I was smoking weed pretty much, every day at this point. And I wouldn't really say it's affected me too much at this point, but that's coming. So eventually I had switched schools again. I ended up going to another school that one of my really good friends at the time was going to as well. So I felt pretty comfortable. And I was obsessed with weed by now. That's all I wanted to talk about. That's all I wanted to do. Yeah, I was that kid. So I eventually got into some more stuff. I started taking hydrocodones before school, and I would do that every other day. And that's, I guess, where I'd say things started going a little bit more downhill for me because I got expelled from school for bringing pills to school, and that was kind of the first really bad thing that happened to me because of drugs. And I was still smoking quite a bit of weed at this time too, so I wouldn't have called myself an addict yet, but definitely an addict in the making. So I was kind of off and on weed and pills for a while, until eventually I got into K2, and I was doing a ton of that. And it only got worse from there because K2 was like the first drug that I can truly say that I was addicted to. I went for a whole week without it when I went on a cruise with my mom, and while I was supposed to be having fun and enjoying myself that entire time, K2, just getting high, was in the back of my head the entire time I was on that cruise. So when I did get back, I went over to my friend's house and he had a bong loaded ready for me right away as soon as I walked in the door. And I was so excited, I was overwhelmed with joy. That's how sad it was. So by now, one of my really good friends who would have had been a really good influence on me had we stayed really good friends, me and him started becoming a lot more distant because I just wanted to hang out with my other friends who got high so I could get high too. So my relationship with my parents was still pretty good. I mean, it got progressively worse over time, and my mom knew that I was always out getting high. She knew that I was smoking a bunch of K2 at this time, and she knew I was out doing whippets and just a whole bunch of dumb shit really. And of course eventually I got into DXM and DPH and I started doing a lot of that shit, and any good friends that I had at this point weren't really a part of my life anymore because all I wanted to do was get high. Like, a friend would ask me if I wanted to come over and just hang out, and I would always make up an excuse so that I could just stay home and get high. So my relationship with my parents started to get a little bit worse and worse. I know they still loved me, but we just never really talked anymore, my mom tried so many times to help me get clean, and she just eventually gave up, and it broke her heart. I was being a shitty son. I mean, because there was a point where I was stealing money from her to go buy drugs. I remember I spent $1,000 on weed and acid in a week, and I got myself into some trouble. I owed this dude about $300, and when my mom found out, she was pissed, but she gave me the $300 to pay it off because I put my life and my family's life in danger by doing that. I didn't know if this dude knew where I lived or not, but he knew people that I knew that knew where I lived, so all because I just wanted my fix. So I had a girlfriend at this time, and we were dating for a few months at this point. And again, it got to a point where I would ignore her phone calls. We wouldn't even hang out that much anymore because I just wanted to stay home and get high or go out with my friends and get high. So needless to say, that relationship didn't last, all because of drugs. And she was a really good person. So I guess my main drug of choice probably at that time was, anything that was a downer. But then again, I was taking anything that I could get my hands on, but I guess downers were my favorite class. I was taking a bunch of pills, Loratabs, Xanax. I think I was doing a lot of codeine too. It was just an escape for me. So my mom eventually sent me to rehab, and it started off as an outpatient program, so I would go in like once every few days, and we'd just sit in a circle and talk about, our addiction, I guess. It was that kind of thing. And I think they drug tested me every couple of weeks. So I was trying really hard not to smoke weed or anything during this time. But I was taking a lot of Benadryl because it was the only thing that I could think that was easy as hell to get and wouldn't show up on a piss test. And this is going to sound insane, but I took about probably 30,000 milligrams in a course of 3 months. Like, apparently I was so high on it one night that I shit myself and pissed myself. Yeah, it's disgusting, but, I also had no motivation to go do anything. So it was rough for a while, so eventually I had some friends that convinced me to smoke a blunt with them, and, they knew that I was going to get drug tested in rehab. So, I said, fuck it, and I smoked a blunt with these people, and I was just trying not to think about it, just wanted to get high. So when I got tested, they actually let you go to the bathroom to do it, and you can close the door. And I think I pissed a very tiny bit, and then I just filled the rest up from the sink with some warm water, and just kind of shook it. And the lady actually kind of called me out on it, but I just stuck to my story that I was just drinking a whole bunch of water that day. And she let it slide, but, I'm sure she wasn't buying it. So I started smoking more again. So I got myself this really big glass, like Gandalf pipe, which my mom would eventually come to find in my car. She was going through a lot more than just my car, though. She was going through my text messages, who I was calling, all that stuff. So she knew what was up. So one day she came into my room holding my pipe, and she basically told me to pack up because she was done with it, and she sent me to inpatient rehab. And I spent about a little over a month in rehab. My relationship with my parents was kind of starting to get a little bit better at this time. But I was so pissed at my mom at first. I would always give her the cold shoulder. And I just tried to make it really obvious that I was pissed off at her. But she didn't care, right? She just wanted to get me clean. She was desperate. But no, our relationship did start to get a little bit better. I was starting to even look better. I started to feel better. But I knew that I still wanted to get high. You're not going to quit drugs just because somebody tells you to or wants you to. You're only going to quit if you actually want to quit. You have to actually really want it. And, I could keep telling myself that I did want to quit all I wanted, but, I knew that I was still going to do it because, I wish I didn't do drugs. I wish I didn't like them so much, but I do like them and I do want to do them. So, anyways, eventually after I got out of rehab, I think I was clean for a little bit, a few weeks. But no, that didn't last. I eventually started smoking weed again, K2, DXM, taking DPH, just fell right back into my old ways, just like that. So my mom had gotten a job offer, and she was going to move to a completely different town, but she refused to take me with her. So I ended up living with my dad for a while, which wasn't bad. I love my dad. He's awesome. But, whilst I was living with him, I was still smoking weed and doing a whole bunch of other stupid shit. So I stayed with my dad for a while. Eventually, I moved into my friend's apartment with him and his fiance and another friend. And all we did in that apartment was party every single night. We'd drink, smoke weed, cocaine, you name it, drop acid, all that stuff. So that went on for a few months. We trashed that apartment. We really fucked it up. So I did end up moving back in with my dad eventually because it didn't work out with my friend and his ex-fiance. Excuse me. So, it was for the best in the end. So I moved back in with my dad, and this is probably where I started drinking a bunch. I wouldn't have called myself an alcoholic, but definitely borderline alcoholic. I was still kind of doing everything else, but mainly drinking. I was drinking every night at work, after work, even before work. I worked in a kitchen, and it was just filled with bad influences. Everyone smoked and drank, so I would pretty much just smoke and drink all night, every night. And I would drive home like that. And I've almost gotten into a couple accidents. I remember one night I was driving home, and I guess I must have blacked out in a moment. I veered off the highway onto the side, and I ran over a small sign. I don't remember what kind of sign it was, but it was just a small one. I knocked it over, and it didn't really do much damage to my car, but I pulled out of there so fast, and I got myself home, and I was so alert and just trying to be super careful. So, honestly, I am very lucky and blessed to be alive today. So yeah, I was drinking a lot. I did eventually cut down my drinking, though, quite a bit. So something I actually failed to mention was I had actually gotten 2 DWIs a couple years prior to this. And so my court date finally came around. I was put on a year of probation, and I had to do mandatory AA classes. So this actually did keep me from smoking weed for the most part. I wasn't smoking weed for a while after that. My PO drug tested me one time, and I actually passed that one time that he did test me. So when I saw after a few weeks that went by he wasn't testing me anymore, I figured maybe he trusted me now. I did eventually, take a couple hits of a blunt one night on acid. And I never got tested again. Other than that one time, I think I was being pretty smart with it. I wasn't doing anything else. After that time, it already made me paranoid enough, so I just didn't smoke again after that. I gave all my pipes, all my grinders away to a friend that I worked with. But instead of smoking weed, I started doing a lot of acid and shrooms. Like, I was tripping pretty much every other night, and the main reason is because it was like the only thing that I could get. And like, if that's all I had, then I guess that's all I'm taking. Like, it got to a point where I could take like 5 tabs of acid and I wouldn't even be tripping anymore. I would just feel like a little high and a little energetic. Anyways, after my probation was kind of over, I went back to smoking a little bit of weed. Was doing DXM again here and there. So yeah, no, I still kept going back to my old ways every time. Then one day I got fired from my job. They said somebody saw me weighing my weed on a scale at work. And there's cameras where they said that I was doing that, and I was begging them to check them, but I guess they just never bothered. They just took that person's word for it, whoever said it. Oh, and to make matters worse, they fired me through a text message. Seriously. So anyway, I got super depressed about that because, I loved that job. I had so much fun doing that job. Even if I wasn't high or drunk, I just loved that environment and the people that I worked with. And it was pretty good money too, so I went into a depressive state, started taking pills again to just help me forget about it, DXM, all that. Eventually, one night, I took way too much DXM, and I guess I kind of overdosed, and they brought me to a hospital. And when I was at the hospital, I couldn't pee, and I tried for like hours, and I just couldn't pee, so they ended up putting a catheter in. Don't do drugs because you might just end up with a tube up your dick for 2 weeks. So after the hospital, they wanted to have me admitted to a suicidal watch place. And I refused because I wasn't suicidal. I was just going through a really rough time, and I was just getting high to forget about it. And I had just taken too much one night. And yeah, it looks like I just saw and went through some shit. But that's only because they shoved a tube up my dick. Yeah, I'm traumatized. Anyways, I did finally get myself out of it. I ended up moving in with my mom in the other town, where I'm at now, actually. Because, my dad, he was kind of fed up with it too. He was tired of dealing with it. Me always being high and drunk and stuff. So when I first got here, I was doing pretty good. I smoked very rarely, every once in a blue moon if I could get it. I wasn't doing too much DXM. Once in a blue moon, if I could, get some from the store, then I would. But I was even working out at this time and, trying to stay fit. I was eating healthy. But then here comes the last drug I was ever hooked on. Good old Adderall. When Adderall came in, I felt unstoppable on that stuff. I wasn't even doing anything. I was just gaming. But the Adderall, it just made everything that I did so much more fun, enjoyable, and interesting. And it made me a beast at games. And I could actually talk to people and hold a conversation with no problems at all, which I would usually have trouble doing. And yeah, that was nice. That's why I loved it. So, about 2017, I started drinking a lot again. But I was drinking wine. I would finish an entire bottle of wine every night. And when I could, I would throw some Addy in there as well. So I kept doing Addy for a long time, until about 4 months ago. Yeah, so 4 months ago was the last time I ever did Addies, and I've been clean ever since. And I'm trying really hard to keep it that way. And YouTube and gaming is helping a lot with that. But I have a record now. I lost a lot of good friends. I ruined a couple good relationships. I got myself into a lot of trouble because of drugs. And the fact that I'm even here to be able to tell this today is a fucking miracle. I should probably be dead, as much stupid shit as I've done. So yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I know this video was pretty long, and there's not going to be many people that make it this far. Maybe a couple. But if you did, thank you so much for hearing me out and listening. I always hope there's just that one person. I know I don't get many viewers, but maybe just 1 out of 70 viewers, watches this, hears me out, and then kind of maybe rethinks the choice in life. I don't know, I think there's always just that one chance that you could save a life. You never know. Anyways, guys, that's all I wanted to get off my chest and say. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will definitely see you in the next one with more story times. Peace.